burning questions? Announcements first, then we'll do burning questions. Yeah.
Last chance to order a pie.
Oh.
Literally. Yeah.
Pies, anyone?
I'll take a verbal order during the break.
Okay. Alright, sounds good.
Order for me, I'm told order.
Alright.
We're still having trouble finding time to do homework.
Okay. I'm assuming that you're all having a hard time doing homework outside of class, and some of the rest of us are too.
I have an
So-
announcement.
Okay.
Before we go on. Yeah,
Yep.
Stone Soup ribbon cutting, December 3rd, 3 p.m. That's where all the partners are coming together. It's a press event. You get to tours of the building at King Street. It's Tuesday, 3 p.m. And then our party has moved from the 7th to the 14th, so change it on your calendars.
Is Stone Soup going to be available for community use?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Mid-December on.
So if you want to have our holiday party in that December there?
Yeah?
Yeah. Do it.
Woohoo, right? Sounds good.
Get in the list.
Youth Grow is still technically a member, so you get first dibs at booking it.
Brilliant.
We're so technical.
Okay. And actually, I heard a good question that I think is worth taking a few minutes on. Do you want to bring up the thing about the little food co-op? Or who was asking whether we should discuss it in class?
I was.
Yeah.
I don't want to like.
No, we can discuss it.
Yeah, you want to discuss for a couple minutes?
I was interested in
How did you
it.
feel about breaking
Yeah,
it
you're
up?
So there's the artichoke food co-op that is down the road. It's closing basically due to like long-term financial problems.
Okay.
And so I think my big question is, like, I stopped being actively involved about like 6 months ago because I was like, oh, we need to deal with this financial situation because it's not working. A lot of like disagreement. So I like stopped actively being involved, but no one else wanted to be on the board, so I'm technically the president. So, I'm like wondering my financial liability.
Wow, okay. Well, what have we learned about board responsibility and financial liability? Does the business have a lot of debt? Anyone? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It's
So
not
what's-
huge.
Huh?
I bet it's all relative. It was a small operation, so it's
Okay.
it's not.
Well, debt is debt. Yeah.
Alright, well, without getting too much into
Yeah.
detail.
I can
So,
probably try to do it.
yeah, that's fine. But in general terms, what's the thing that keeps board members protected from that kind of liability?
501c, your corporation? No?
Corporate veil, but isn't the corporate veil maintained by good practices? So if they had like bad
Good governance, right?
financial
Good
practices.
governance is what protects us. So, good annual meetings, so we, have you been doing that?
I would say no.
She's looking a little queasy there.
Alright, okay, so this is,
I'd say if anything that you should do, we probably did the opposite.
yeah. Well, you're not alone, so I don't want to make you feel like you're the first co-op that's ever gone down this road, because you're not. But that's why we're here, because I don't want you guys to fall in that position, So, off the top of my head, I'd say you're probably going to be fine, but we should talk. And I can help connect you with other resources. But yeah, that's exactly why you need to do your good governance, and you also, do you want to share with anybody like what you think the financial problem was?
I mean, I would say like it was started like with a lot of good intentions and like never a very solid plan. And I think for a long time it existed, like it was all volunteer. I was able to do that because of like low overhead. There wasn't a lot of competition in terms of like organic food. And then like the market changed, there's more organic food out there. Like all volunteer meant it always was like super inconsistent with like sometimes if someone couldn't come because they got called into work or they were sick or whatever, it was just closed, like it was really unreliable. But there was never like the ability to make a plan to like, okay, how can we hire someone so that it makes it stable, or hire someone to create a business plan. Like there's never like, so like as like the financial situation got worse and worse. It was just like, yeah.
When did it open?
2001.
So the whole thing about natural and organic food being available to a lot more people now is actually been an issue for a lot of food co-ops. So when a lot of those were getting started, mostly in the 70s, your average grocery store didn't really have those options. So the reason people started the natural food co-ops was in order to serve a need of their membership, and the members were the consumers, and they wanted, healthy organic food. And then, by like the 90s, we had Whole Foods and like the big supermarkets were also getting into organic, and that ended up putting co-ops out of business because they were no longer the only game in town. So the co-ops that have survived and thrived have really figured out a different way to appeal to customers, because the big supermarkets are more convenient for a lot of people, Like if you shop at a food co-op, often you shop at the food co-op for some things and you still go to the big grocery store for something else, right? Does anybody do that?
Sure.
So if you can get your organic stuff at the big store, that's hard to compete against, right? Because then you only have one shopping trip a year. So the co-ops have to all figure out like what's their value proposition to the customer, like what brings them there when they can get organic food somewhere else, right? And you're right, a lot of businesses haven't really weathered that very well. Has anybody else heard of any co-op failures recently? Have you crossed your email box? It's been a big one.
I know like Food for Thought, the worker co-op was really struggling, but
I think they were gonna close.
they're not gonna.
They haven't failed. They're trying. They're trying to keep it open. But yeah, it's another industry. The bookstore industry is not famous for being real strong right now. So they're also trying to reinvent themselves as like, what do we offer people now that they can get all their books on Amazon? And they used to do Food for Thought and Amherst.
Oh, yeah.
They used to do a lot of business in textbooks, but now it's like we don't even buy textbooks at the college bookstore anymore. All the college kids are downloading textbooks.
Food for Thought has an Indiegogo campaign going on.
Exactly. So right now they're doing a big campaign. But I was thinking even bigger than that. One of the original. Does anybody know about Mondragon?
Yeah.
So Mondragon is a network of cooperatives in the Basque country that's part of Spain, and they are famous because most of their economy is built around this network of cooperatives, and it's been really strong there for like 50 years. People have all kinds of cooperatives, child care cooperatives, banking cooperatives, and a lot of manufacturing cooperatives. And their first cooperative was this business called Fagor, which is a business that was a manufacturer of small appliances for kitchens. So toasters, lately they make like refrigerators and washing machines and big stuff like that. They just announced that they're filing bankruptcy. Big anchor original co-op of the Mondragon Corporation. And this is a really interesting thing to look into, because businesses have a life cycle, right? Most businesses have a very short life cycle. Some businesses have like a 50-year life cycle, or even 100 or 200 years, the longest running ones. But most of them are much shorter than that. And industries change, especially the times we're living in now, where technology changes all the time. Like, your technology changes, and everything changes about your industry, and if you don't keep up, you're not still in there. And that's not always a bad thing. So the people at Mondragon are kind of trying to spin this as like evolution, and we're like getting into the 21st century, and who needed manufacturing anyway? But I mean, so it's a really interesting thing. And I think it's useful for everybody to realize that we work, in an economy where businesses start, they succeed for a little while, they might flounder, they might get better, and eventually they fail. But failing isn't always failing. We were talking about this at the SAGE conference, right? That even in failure, there could be a really long run of people learning things, people getting good, healthy, organic food for 10 years. Is that really a failure? There was a co-op that I gave an example of at the Sage conference, the Burley Design Co-op that made bike trailers for kids and stuff and whatever. You could hitch it onto your bike. They were a really well-known cooperative, really popular. People liked them. It was a good place to work for a long time. They eventually, I don't know if they shut the business down or if they sold it. I should look back at that. But people were really upset. The co-op movement was really upset when we lost this kind of flagship co-op, right? But some of the people who were in it defended it later and said, this is not a failure. Like, hundreds of people made their living at this company over the course of decades. We sent our kids to college with the money that we made at this company. We made a great name for the co-op movement. We contributed to a lot of things, and it doesn't live forever, but that doesn't mean it wasn't like a good thing to have around while it lasted. So there's just a little perspective.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Do we know in Mondragon what happened to the employees of that? Did they get incorporated into?
That's a good point. So what's really special about Mondragon is that because they have this network of cooperatives, what ends up happening is that anyone who's laid off at one of the member co-ops, as much as they can, they get absorbed into other businesses in the network. There's so many worker co-ops in that kind of ecosystem that they're able to do that, I mean, we'd have a hard time doing that in Boston or Worcester, but if we had, if half of the economy was cooperatives, we had that kind of solidarity, then.
Do we know if that actually happened?
I don't know for certain, but I think that's the idea, yeah.
That was happening in like 2008 when other branches were open.
Yeah.
I can ask a little questions
Yeah.
quickly. One of them is like, for Jen's situation of being on the board, I had another friend who's on the board of that too.
Yeah.
What if you are on the board of a cooperative and it's failing, like getting off the board? Is that different depending on the bylaws, or is there just like best practices around getting off the boards? Or like extricating yourself from sinking ships?
Well, I mean, if you're on the board and it's failing and it's really going to shut down, then it really is your responsibility to shut it down responsibly. I mean, if you think that you need to get off of the board because someone else has done stuff that you think is not, I don't know. I mean, I would want to know what the answers are for getting off the board. Because when you join the board, that's one of the risks that you take on, is the responsibility of potentially closing it down if it has to be closed down.
And the other question is like volunteer cooperatives.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you seen that model work really well, and what do you think it takes to make a volunteer cooperative successful?
Maybe a wealthy benefactor. I don't know. Were you gonna suggest something, Tanya?
Well, it's just like it's funny because I feel like it's the same conversation that we were having. Like a lot of people have this idea of nonprofits, and maybe it's a good idea to start a business and run a business and start running a business like a nonprofit, and then like you do everything like with a bootstrap and really short on money and really short on resources and still trying to run it with that mentality. And I feel like it's just a lot of that stuff happens because of that. Like if it was a real business, then you have a business plan and so I feel like it's probably because I know a lot of people that are involved in the co-op. If you put a letter out, you can say, well, we owe this much money, we're gonna try to sell all this stuff, who's gonna buy it, and they're probably gonna be able to cover their butts. But I just feel like it's really interesting, but I feel like that happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, one way to hear what you're saying is that if you start a co-op, if you avoid the nonprofit mentality, what you need to do is to think in terms of profit maximization.
Not in a co-op is not exactly what the mentality is either. But I think the business mentality is different of the nonprofit mentality.
I mean, I think profit maximization is, that's a term that we use to describe kind of the motive behind a whole society, right?
Right.
The modern capitalist society that we live in, everything is for the sake of profit. I think within a firm, within a co-op, or any business, you have to be thinking about your income and expenses, right? You have to be taking in more than you put out. And the way that you do that is by adding value. So I really think of it as adding value. So the milk farm, like the dairy co-ops take in milk and they turn it into cheese and they sell it. When you take milk and turn it into cheese, you're adding value to it. And because you added value to it, that's how you get paid. That's why you got paid. So I think that even if we were dealing in like a non-monetary economy, if like, you know, our completely utopian, you know, ideals, we would still want to add value to stuff. And we would still want our labor to produce value, you know? We would still want to be efficient, you know? We would still want to like do the most we can with the hours that we have so that we're not wasting time and we can spend the rest of our time, you know, playing games and having a utopian community. So I mean, I think it's a bit mushy, you know? I don't know if that addressed your question though.
I just have a lot of questions in the back of my mind because, running a business is running a business. You know? And you do think about, you have to think about making a profit in order to grow your business, and then that really seems like me a slippery slope to being, you know, a crappy business.
It's true. Yeah, you do still, it's true. And I have the same kind of disappointment that I feel like I hear in your voice when I got started in cooperatives because I wanted to smash capitalism. You know, I wanted to bring it all down and like, and I still do. But I know, like, I think that cooperatives, I now think that a regular worker-owned cooperative that operates in the capitalist system and the money system is not the thing that's really carrying out the capitalist system, I think now. I think what it is, it's something that helps us practice to getting towards a more equal society. It gives us tools that we need to be able to do these things, but I don't think it's like the beginning and end of the utopian revolution.
I would also say, like, yeah, maybe there's a slippery slope to, like, being a big evil corporation or whatever, but I also think that, like, being a poorly run food co-op doesn't serve people either. You know, like,
no, a poorly run business is also crap.
So it's like,
but it's really hard to, you know, I mean, it's like,
Yeah. Well, okay, so anybody, I mean, we're being very, I'm glad we're doing this kind of theoretical exercise before we get into the meat of the matter here. Does anybody want to add to that conversation before we get into it?
Go all night.
We could. All right, let's not. Okay, so I heard, this is going to be, because nobody has time to do work outside of the class, I totally understand. We're going to do a lot of hands-on work time tonight, like we've been doing the last couple of sessions. The first thing that we wanted to do was, we're going to take about a half an hour to go over the stuff that we discussed last week about estimating the size of your market. Because I think that really is like the hardest thing that we're trying to do in this whole co-op academy, right? So let's take a few minutes and have people, I know you guys had generated a list of questions, and I imagine other people did too. So I kind of want to see if we can answer some good questions and get you guys on a good footing before we break up into groups and have you do some real work on this. So do you guys want to start by throwing out your questions and see what we can do?
Was that one from last week or is this this week?
So it was actually an overhead, so I'm going to put it back up.
Oh,
It was emailed out.
Oh, okay, it went on an email.
Our questions are kind of like stuff for us to find out, like,
Yeah.
or like, but I guess,
That's cool. I'm going to
yeah, so, the questions we have brainstormed was, so we wanna find out, we wanna, like, estimate, you know, whatever we're gonna sell next year or whatever, like, how we talked about last time. So, the first question is down is how many, flower lots have we sold in the past year?
Mhm.
amount of time, until one person buys another bottle of hot sauce, well, in between the one and second bottle. We wanna know our unique customer, and the average of how much hot sauce bottles are sold in a month. And then also we just generated like a list of restaurants or stores we can sell our hot sauce to when it goes wholesale.
Okay. So your typical customer then is so are you selling still to individual customers? You probably are, right?
Not right now, we just
Not right now, but we will be, so.
Okay. So if your customers are restaurants and wholesale, I mean, so those would be markets, like food markets. Have you approached them already, and what do they say?
So we've approached, we have two people who are committed that they said they would purchase from us.
Okay.
And we don't know how much they would want. They just committed to holding it in stock and give me like a trial and see what went.
Okay.
And then in terms of restaurants, we haven't approached them yet, but we have a list of businesses that we have relationships with, that we think we can start with. But we were also talking a little bit over Jenny's list about how, when we did the cost of goods worksheet, it was for individual bottles based on our sales last year.
Yeah.
And that we should probably think about figuring out a realistic wholesale price.
Yeah.
If we're gonna try and break into that market as like.
So when we talked about that, we kind of talked about like, that's kind of where like, we might have some difficulty because our bottle's $6 now and our, like our profit, we profit $2.50 off of it right now. So, and we haven't done the net.
Our profit's like $3 gross, and so we're still going through challenges with the overhead, but we were saying even if it was $2.50 net, then,
Like, so if we charge $6 a bottle and then we wanted to do wholesale, how much would we take off so that it's a realistic wholesale price? Because we can't take off $2.50 because we would be profiting. Then, you know what I mean? But like,
yeah.
if we took off $1,
So
it would
what
still
you-
be $5 a bottle, which is.
What you would need to do is, okay, I think you guys are gonna need to do some work on this, because it's gonna be hard. So you need to ask, first of all, I would ask your potential customers, the two people that have committed to you already, what their typical markup is. Because they have done their own calculations about how much they buy and how much they sell, and they've done calculations about literally like how many feet on each shelf they have to devote to each thing. And typically a retail business will mark up your product by 100%. So they want to only pay half of what the retail price is going to be.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out with them what their retail price is going to be, and probably they're going to only want to have to pay like half of that. So that's just off the top of my head. So I think you should be thinking along those lines, and really it's like you've got to go to them and ask them. And I would ask the restaurants too.
in your experience, a restaurant, so if it was for a restaurant, it would be like a compliment for the people. Because I was thinking 100% markup for wholesale too, but I don't have any baseline for.
I don't know about restaurants either. Has anybody else done any kind of purchasing in a restaurant and would know the answer to that? I mean, they're not really selling, because they're not reselling it, they're just buying it to keep it on the table.
Yeah.
Like I said. I don't know the answer to
There's
that.
the buppies and the babies.
But probably they want the wholesale price too. Who else has got questions that might be helpful to the whole group before we break up into groups? Are people wanting to break up to, does it sound like a good idea to break up into groups and do some work on this?
Or you can connect it to me.
Okay. Alright, then let's go ahead and do that. I want you to raise your hand if you run into problems. This is who wasn't here last week for the laundromat work? Okay. So, we went through this demonstrating demand example, really, about a laundromat in Dorchester that I worked with a couple of years ago. And so basically, since every industry is different, you're all going to have, you know, I didn't make a worksheet that's going to cover all of you guys because you're all so different. But I'm hoping that everybody will find a way to work through steps like this. So it's going to be more custom for each of your businesses. But it is going to be, you are going to have steps like, you know, where your business is going to be, who are your customers, what's your market area, how many of your customers are in your market area, and how much do you think they're gonna pay for your product. So that's gonna look different for all of your businesses, but I'd like you to think along those lines. And raise your hand if you want me to come help you. I'm gonna jump around and and try to help each individual group. So let's do this for like 20-25 minutes. Is that okay?
We were